Y&R Spoilers There are secrets that are always buried in the past, seemingly sleeping forever with time, just waiting for a light touch to explode, sweeping away everything in the present. For Audra, the relationship between her and Holden was once a deep memory, both brilliant, haunting, and filled with nameless pain. But no one can run away from their past forever, especially when those involved have all become people with hearts, pride, and wounds that have not fully healed. Holden's return not only stirs up the emotions that Audra has worked so hard to bury, but also directly threatens the fragile relationship she is trying to build with Nate. Crimson lights that morning seemed quieter than usual, but in Audra's mind, everything was screaming chaos. She thought she could hide everything under a mask of calmness, she thought she could drink all her confusion in the bitter taste of coffee, but the moment Holden walked in, she knew that everything she had believed was an illusion. That man, with his determined eyes, confident smile, leisurely gait as if the whole world belonged to him, had been the place where she had entrusted her youth, her dreams, her pure and passionate love, and the most painful tragedy of her life. She had thought her life would be completely attached to that man, until the storm came and swept everything away in one cruel night. Holden did not come here just to reminisce about the past, he came with a clear goal, carrying the temperament of someone who had experienced all the ups and downs, no longer afraid of anything, including Audra's rejection or resentment. There are memories that he never wants to forget, and there are also secrets that he is willing to reveal if it makes Audra have to face herself. But whether Holden's return is a threat, a provocation, or an opportunity to start all over again, only time will tell. Audra knew that everything would no longer be balanced from the moment Holden appeared in Genoa City. The trembling in her eyes, the rapid breathing when remembering the past, the feeling that she had never truly let go, all seemed to want to suffocate her reason. Since leaving Holden, Audra has repeatedly told herself that she must live differently, must be strong, must find a new shore. That is why she sought out Nate, the man with gentle eyes, with calm protection, with a future that seemed no longer uncertain, no longer stormy with tears. But all the security of the present is suddenly fragile when the truth about the child she and Holden have together, the child she once thought she could keep in the dark forever, begins to crack the wall that separates them. Nate once believed that the love between him and Audra was a mature feeling, built on understanding, trust, and even the little secrets that everyone has the right to keep to themselves. But he could not have expected that the secret that Audra was hiding was something that could completely change their lives. As the whispers of public opinion seep through every corner of this small town, Nate begins to realize that there is something unusual about Audra. He could not have expected that just a chance meeting between Audra and Holden would ignite the fire of doubt in his heart. Sometimes just a look, a gesture, is enough for outsiders to realize that there is a very deep past that binds these two people. Things got worse when Holden suddenly took the initiative to approach Audra, not hiding his intention to pull her towards him, even willing to put everything on the scale to reclaim what once belonged to him. Holden's confidence and boldness made Audra both confused and hurt. She knew that she had never been decisive with the past, but she also did not have the courage to destroy everything she had worked hard to build with Nate. During the long sleepless nights, Audra was constantly haunted by the memory of the child she and Holden had together, a small creature that for many reasons, she was forced to leave, leaving a wound that would never heal in both of their hearts. Holden understood Audra better than anyone. He knew that every time she avoided him, her heart was weak, every time she stood at the crossroads of sin and dreams, between harsh reality and what was lost. That's why Holden doesn't hesitate to talk about the past, talk about what they've been through together, both happiness and seemingly indelible wounds. He doesn't accept Audra's denial of the past, and even less does he accept her trying to act like she's okay when she's never really forgotten him. To Holden, love has never been something that can be bought and sold, and certainly not a game of power as Audra thinks. During the long nights, Audra wondered if she was strong enough to face the truth, the consequences of choices that once seemed so right, only to look back and see that everything was just a vicious cycle of mistakes and regrets. She knew that just one moment of weakness would cause everything to collapse, beyond saving. But it was also in those moments that Audra realized that she had never truly forgotten Holden, had never stopped blaming herself for the child she could not keep, had never stopped dreaming of a complete family, even though she knew it was all just a distant dream. The truth about the child became more and more of an obsession for both Audra and Holden. There were secrets that seemed to be buried forever, but the more they tried to hide them, the more fate pushed them to the brink of being exposed. Holden repeatedly reminded Audra of the old days, of unfinished dreams, of unfulfilled promises, making Audra's heart increasingly weak, torn between reality and the past. Audra used to think Holden was just a beautiful memory, but the more she met him, the more she realized that she had never forgotten the feeling of safety when she was with him, had never broken the invisible emotional bond that bound them both. Nate found it increasingly difficult to control his doubts. Although he tried to appear calm, his heart was always filled with questions about Audra's past. He began to rummage through the smallest traces, trying to find the truth, even though deep down he still hoped everything was just a nightmare. But when the truth about Audra and Holden's child gradually emerged, everything Nate had believed in collapsed. He painfully realized that his love might just be a pale shadow compared to the fiery past that Audra had with Holden. That hurt not only killed his faith, but also pushed him into a dead end of despair, jealousy, and hatred. Meanwhile, Holden kept putting pressure on Audra, not only with emotions, but also with drastic actions. He wanted Audra to face the truth, with her true self, no longer running away, no longer pretending to be happy with Nate just to fill the void of the past. He was willing to accept all the consequences, just to reclaim what he had lost: a complete love, a family, and a child that would never return. Victor's financial delay made things even more complicated. Power calculations, unapproved contracts, stalled investments brought with them a series of consequences. Audra stood between pressure from Victor, threats from the past with Holden, and the collapse of trust in Nate, gradually realizing that her life had never truly belonged to her. Dreams that once seemed so close, now seem so far away. Just one small mistake is enough to lose everything. And in those stormy days, Audra knew she had to choose. Either face the past, admit all the mistakes and hurts so that she can move forward honestly, or continue to run away in fear, and then destroy every last chance of happiness with her own hands. But is the truth powerful enough to heal the wounds, or will it only deepen the pain for everyone involved? Can Audra forgive herself, Holden, and all the past failures to find a new path, or will all that remain be broken and regret forever? When a secret that has been buried for too long is brought up, the storm never shows any signs of stopping. Audra knows she cannot live with lies forever, but she also does not have the courage to trade the future for a confession. And in that moment, all she could do was face the true feelings in her heart, the pain of herself and those she loved, even though the future was filled with long days of challenges, unanswered questions and choices that were not easy for anyone. If you want to add any details or expand on any aspect, please send me the plot. I will continue the story logically and seamlessly. No one expected that a chance dinner at the athletic club would become the source of an underground storm that threatens to destroy everything Audra has worked hard to build. But for Nate, every little detail carries the weight of suspicion. Every glance, every smile, every light touch between Audra and Holden becomes evidence of things left unsaid. Sometimes, just a seemingly innocuous moment is enough to expose all the secrets, especially when the lover's heart has begun to ring alarm bells. Nate is not the suspicious type, but his life in the upper-class world of Genoa City has taught him one thing: what is seen is only the surface. Behind every peaceful appearance there are countless hidden calculations. So, when he meets Audra and Holden at the athletic club, the atmosphere between them is more than just a chance meeting between acquaintances. There was something about the way they looked at each other, the way Audra smiled unconsciously when Holden joked about hating airplane food, that made all of Nate's senses tense up like strings. The athletic club wasn't a noisy or bustling place that night, but for Nate, every step closer to Audra and Holden's table was heavy. In the dim light, he saw them sitting closer than necessary, not in the distant way of people who hadn't seen each other for a long time, but intimate, open, filled with memories and emotions that were hard to hide. Audra, who was always calm and in control of every situation, was a little confused this time, occasionally looking at Holden as if searching for an invisible support. Holden was always himself. Confident, open, ready to talk humorously but unable to hide the meaningful look he gave Audra. Nate stepped back, telling himself not to speculate. But as they got closer, the unusual comfort between Audra and Holden became more apparent. It wasn't the usual hugs or polite questions between old acquaintances, but rather the longer-than-usual glances, the gentle smiles, and especially the feeling that the two of them were sharing a secret that belonged only to them. That feeling of being left out made Nate both bitter and angry. He couldn't accept that the woman he loved could hide something from him, especially when Holden, a man with so much mystery and history with Audra, appeared at this exact moment. When Holden argued that they only had dinner together because he hated airplane food, the answer sounded reasonable, but it unintentionally increased Nate's discomfort. He knew very well that when someone really had nothing to hide, they wouldn't have to come up with such a perfect excuse. Nate's radar immediately lit up. Audra's every reaction was noticed by him in every detail. Her hands gently squeezed the napkin, her eyes avoided whenever Nate looked directly at her. Nate remembered those expressions clearly. They were signs of insecurity, of fear of being discovered, of someone trying to hide something too big for him to control. After a tense dinner, the silence between Audra and Nate lasted longer than usual. Nate tried to push away negative thoughts, telling himself that maybe he was just being too sensitive because of the pressure of work. But the more he tried to ignore them, the more his doubts grew, smoldering like a fire under the ashes, just waiting for a strong wind to explode. He began to observe Audra more closely, realizing that she had been receiving secret calls frequently lately, was often distracted, and her eyes always had a hint of inexplicable worry. Those small changes, even though Audra tried to hide them, still couldn't fool someone who had experienced so much loss and betrayal like Nate. Finally, Nate couldn't take it anymore. One evening, when Audra had just refused to have dinner with him because she was busy, Nate decided to wait for her to come home, hoping to have a frank conversation. When Audra appeared, her face showed obvious fatigue. Nate didn't beat around the bush, he looked straight into Audra's eyes, asking about the real relationship between her and Holden. The atmosphere became suffocating. All of Audra's explanations only made Nate more suspicious. He realized that for the first time in many months of love, there was no longer absolute trust between them. The gaps were getting bigger, the words left unsaid were increasing, and an invisible wall was gradually building between two hearts that he thought would never be apart. Audra was confused. She didn't expect things to go this far. She knew that if she told the truth, everything would collapse immediately. But if she continued to hide it, she would forever live in fear of being discovered, forever a two-faced woman, wanting to maintain a peaceful love with Nate, but unable to break away from her turbulent past with Holden. Audra stood at a crossroads. On one side was the safety and stability of Nate, on the other side was the mysterious and intense attraction of Holden. She wanted to scream, to cry, to be forgiven, but the more she tried to find a way out, the deeper she sank into her own spiral of lies. Meanwhile, Audra was torn by guilt and fear. She knew Nate was not a man who could be easily deceived, and certainly not one who could forgive such a big secret. But Holden became more and more proactive, appearing by her side more and more often, constantly reminding her of the old days, of the lost child, of what they had shared. Audra felt like she was trapped in a terrifying dream, where she had no choice, and could only helplessly watch everything gradually slip away from her. The athletic club, once a meeting place for the upper class, has now become a haunting memory for Audra. Every time she passed by there, she remembered Nate's painful eyes, Holden's hidden smile, and herself, the woman standing between two men, unable to decide which path was truly for her. As each day passed, the secret became heavier, not only a psychological burden, but also a real threat to her future. Just one wrong word, one moment of carelessness, everything would be exposed to the light, and then, no one could save anything. Nate continued to investigate. He began asking Audra's friends and relatives about her past, hoping to find a clue to the unexplainable. He quietly observed Holden, realizing that between him and Audra there existed a deeper connection, stronger than any normal friendship. Nate felt like an outsider, like a lost person in his own story. Jealousy, hurt, and betrayal made him gradually become quiet and distant, but deep in his soul, he still prayed that one day Audra would be brave enough to tell the truth. The final confrontation between Nate and Audra took place in the gloomy atmosphere of a rainy afternoon. Nate could no longer keep his composure. He asked Audra directly if she had ever loved Holden, if there was anything between them that he needed to know. Audra shed tears, speechless. That silence answered everything for her. Nate turned away, carrying a broken heart, while Audra stood still, immersed in regret and fear of what was to come. There are secrets that cannot be hidden forever. There are relationships, no matter how beautiful, that can be broken just because of a moment of dishonesty. Audra knew that she had lost not only a man who loved her, but also the chance to start over, to live true to herself. And Nate, despite the pain, also understood that love cannot exist without absolute trust. He left, leaving behind all the memories, just hoping that one day he could forgive Audra, as well as forgive himself for loving too much. From that moment on, the relationship between Audra, Nate and Holden changed forever, like a broken glass vase that could not be repaired. Everyone carries nameless wounds, everyone must learn to live with the wounds in their hearts, with regrets and torment about things that cannot be returned. If you want to expand or add new developments, please continue sending details. I will extend the storyline reasonably and seamlessly. Meanwhile, Victor Newman is like an old panther, always lurking around Genoa City's power play. There is no direct evidence that Victor is behind Audra's financial troubles, but everyone knows that he always has an indirect influence, always knows who needs to be in trouble, who should be favored, and who should be wary of stalled investments. Holden's appearance at the time when Audra is most troubled about capital and contracts could actually be a move in the plan to control the young, ambitious partners who are not stubborn enough to escape Victor's influence. Audra knows that just a small mistake can cause everything to collapse. Even though she tries to appear to be a brave businesswoman, she still cannot avoid long nights of wondering. Is all her success paid for by old debts, by forbidden feelings for Holden, by dependence on forces like Victor? She tried to avoid Holden, to avoid any opportunity that might arouse Nate's suspicions, but fate was cruel. Big contracts, lucrative investments, even the most important events in the industry forced Audra and Holden to appear together, to discuss, to dine, or simply to try to show that they were just old partners, nothing more, nothing less. However, things never stopped at the surface. A few times, when discussing work in the luxurious conference room, Holden's accidental touch, his too long gaze at Audra, or his too loud laughter at a not-so-funny story, all made the people around him start to whisper. And then, every little suspicion gradually grew, especially when Victor's close partners, who were masters at psychological probing and exploiting other people's weaknesses, began to ask, hinting at the complicated past between the two. Nate, the man who always believed he understood Audra, increasingly realized the unusual things, the inexplicable manifestations in the relationship between her and Holden. Although Audra repeatedly affirmed that everything was in the past, that between them there was just a little personal gratitude from the time they worked for Tucker, Nate still could not stop himself from searching for every little piece of information, every trace, every phone call or email that seemed harmless but contained many hidden meanings. And then, rumors about that fateful night in Los Angeles also began to appear. Some said that it was thanks to Holden that Audra was able to escape a stain that could ruin her career. Others said that it was Holden who manipulated everything, leaving Audra trapped in a debt of gratitude. No one knew for sure what the truth was, only knowing that from that moment, the two were like two inseparable planets, even though on the surface they always tried to maintain a perfect social distance. Amidst the whirlwind of personal calculations, old debts, and Victor's hidden influence, Audra becomes more alone than ever. She cannot completely trust anyone. Holden is too much of a mystery, Nate is always haunted by her past, and Victor is willing to do anything to keep the initiative. The feeling of being pushed into a corner makes Audra increasingly tired, wavering between choosing to protect her current love or continuing to pay off past debts to achieve success. In the long sleepless nights, Audra can't help but wonder, what does she owe Holden in the end? A life-saving time, a great favor, Or simply a forbidden love that never had the chance to live fully?